All right, everybody. Well, welcome to another episode of Live from My Drum Room. I have a really special guest with me here today. I'm a young drummer. I still consider him a young drummer because he is a young drummer. And I've actually known my guest today, Ilan Rubin, since he was, I'm going to say, since he was 12 years old. And I'll confirm that when I bring him on. But if you're not familiar with Ilan, he's an incredible musician. I mean, by every measure. Drummer, multi-instrumentalist, composer, producer, and an author with this new book he's just released through Hudson Music, Start Somewhere to Go Somewhere. Great book. It's out now. You can get it. I'm going to insist that you get this. Christmas present for all your drummer friends. And Elon has just such an incredible story, background. You might know him best for his work with Nine Inch Nails. I think for the last 15 or 16 years, he's been the drummer for Nine Inch Nails, but he's also has played with Paramore and The New Regime, Lost Prophets. Phenomenal musician all the way around and a great, great guy. And I'm so excited to have him. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome to Live from My Drum Room, Ilan Rubin.
He is. There he is.
There you are. Welcome. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well.
I've got a lot of people watching, and one friend in particular that I think we both, a mutual friend of ours, Dave Wasikinen,
Hmm.
who knows you from, I'm guessing, when Dave was in San Diego, and
Oh,
of course,
yes.
drummer
Dave and
for
I
the Hooters.
go way, way, way back. He was my first official drum teacher, and he's the one who taught me how to read notation.
No kidding. Okay, he didn't
Yeah,
mention that. Wow.
yeah.
All right.
Way back. Yeah, my dad would take me to lessons with him Saturday mornings for a while. It's a bit blurry as to how long we actually took lessons together, but I always have a very fond spot in my heart for David. And fortunately, I see him every couple years, every few years. I mean, this is going back at least 26 years now.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, great
Man,
guy.
great, great guy. And he said the same. He said great things about you and your family, and from what I know about you, you have, you know, that's a big part of your success, I'm guessing, is the support you've had from your parents and your family and two brothers too. One of
Yep.
one of whom's a musician, I think. Is that
Yeah.
right? Or both musicians?
They both are musicians. They've taken different paths, but yeah, very very musical family.
Yeah.
And I would say with the exception of my mom, because she doesn't play an instrument, but she can hold a tune.
Yep. Yep. That's usually the
Yeah,
case.
the rare time she'll sing even to herself, it is in key. So bravo, mom.
All right, mom. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that tells you she has a natural, seriously. Well,
Mhm.
I know you're being serious too. Like she has a natural ability to stay in tune, and
Mhm.
she has pitch, and yeah.
And I'll tell you what, she'll definitely make a face if I'm not. So she definitely knows what's going on there.
Oh man. Well, I have to say before we start, man, congratulations on everything. I mean everything, Ilan. I mean, going
Well,
back
thank
to,
you.
yeah. Um, the first time I became aware of you, and I think the first time I actually met you, I wouldn't expect you to remember, was at the Modern Drummer Festival. When you won was it the Young Drummer of the Year award? Was that what it was called, or the
It was the Undiscovered Drummer of the
Undiscovered?
Year award, and it was
Yes.
the under 18 category. But yeah,
Yes. Yes.
that would have been 2001.
Yep. Yeah. 2001. I was reading I wasn't sure of the year, and I read it in the back of your book. And but I figured it to be around that time, and you were 12 at the time, right?
I believe
Does that
so.
sound?
Yeah, 11 or
Yeah.
12.
Wow.
11 or
And
12 because it's a blur because you had to make a submission and send in a solo tape and that's how you join the contest and see if you win. So at this point I can't recall how long that span of time was. I'm certain that I was 11 when we made the submission, and when I say we, I mean my parents and I. But yeah, I want to say it was August of 2021 or 2001, sorry, when
mhm.
the thing was, but it feels like another lifetime ago,
It
at
has to,
least.
yeah.
Yeah.
with everything you've done since then, and just your life. I know, you're a dad now, and you're
Mm,
it's another life. Yeah, it's a whole different world. I get it.
yeah.
Yeah. But what was that? Can you remember anything about that day? Just the sort of, was it just so overwhelming to be there? I don't even remember which artists were on the bill that year because I would go to this every year and they all
Hmm.
blend together. But do you have any
Yeah.
memories of that?
I do. As far as the artists, I know Carmine Appice was there, Cindy Blackman.
Okay.
Um, I believe that I hope I don't burn his name, but I believe the guy who won the over 18 division was a guy named, I want to say Gustavo Meli. I
Oh,
could be
yes.
wrong, and if I am, I feel terrible, but that's the name
That
that's popping into mind.
I remember. Yes. Yep. From Argentina.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Okay, all right. So I'm not
Yeah.
insane yet, but it was an exciting thing for me just because that would have been at that point in my life one of the few times to travel to play, but certainly the only time to travel to play by myself, as ridiculous as it sounds. I
Hmm.
had been playing in a band for a couple of years by that point, so I was used to performing, but I was always, at the back of a band and there were other guys on stage. This was a truly solo performance. But it was also exciting for me because I wanted to enter that competition because I saw the video from either the previous year or 2 years back. It was whatever the Tony Royster year was. And I had that tape and I thought, I want to do that when I'm that age. And it panned out. So winning and
Wow.
getting
Yeah.
flown out to go do that, it was an exciting thing. And I'm sure you understand this, and anybody who's performed, once you kind of get on stage and the performance starts, you kind of just get to check out and do the thing you've prepared for. But everything leading up to it was a bit strange. But I do recall I think it was my first meeting with the actual Jim Chapin, which was great. There is a
Yeah.
photo somewhere. I wish it was higher def, but going back to Dave Oskinen, he's the one who got me that book. So meeting Jim a couple of years later, and I would see him at the NAM show
Hmm.
following that, and he always remembered me and would always sit at the pad and he'd talk about Moeller technique, and I'm sure you've witnessed that many times.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that was a
Yeah.
fond memory. And then I also loved part of my prize was getting all the books that I wanted. So I got a handful of books, which I still have to this day. One of them was Master Studies by Joe Morello, and he was there and he signed it for me. Now, one thing I will say, and pardon me if I'm rambling too much already,
No, this is great,
but
man.
a very big turning point in my drumming life was a tape that Hudson Music put out, and they are the publisher of the book. It was a classic drum solos tape, and I talk about this briefly there. But that opened me up to the world of big band and jazz drummers. So at the time, Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson, and Joe Morello were the three that really opened it up for me. But this is, I want to say pre DVD because I had the VHS tape for sure. But I
Hmm.
recall my dad at the hotel asking somebody at the front desk if there was a VCR we could use so I could watch this tape and get inspired to perform. So and I had forgotten that Hudson put that out because, as we said, it's a long time ago. But
Yeah.
just this feeling of coming full circle and them being the ones to put this book out, it just feels like something in the making has finally come to fruition.
What a great story, man. That's so cool. Yeah. And I remember your dad being there with you. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
I Was it just you two? Did your mom come out for it
My
too?
mom was there as well.
Mom
Yeah,
was there
they're
too?
they're they're
Okay.
definitely a unit. Yeah.
And I remember, and I hope you'll take this in the spirit that I mean it. You were just very shy. I remember Kirsten, of course, our dear friend Kirsten
Uh-huh.
Jensen, who
Yeah.
gave me a heads up. I think I knew you had won, and she said, I think she had just signed you, or you had just maybe come on board with Zildjian, not much before that, possibly. I'm not sure. Or maybe were you still with Peisty at the time?
I was still with Peisty, so
Okay, all right,
I mean, since we're talking about Kirsten, it was
yeah,
great. So initially, uh, and a lot of this stuff seems strange in hindsight because
Everything is.
to think of a 10 or 11-year-old trying to get drum endorsements, and obviously this is pre Instagram, pre YouTube. This is just, I play drums, I'm in a band, I need
Hmm.
gear, can you help out? I mean, what's really the incentive for a company at that point? An 11-year-old, other than a hopeful investment in the future.
Hmm.
Now, I know that she was going through some personal stuff at the time, but it didn't work out between Zildjian and 11-year-old me. And Peisty, I'm very grateful to them, came through, and I was with them up until about the age of 16. And I don't
Okay.
really know what happened at the time, but I was making progress in my career, and I'd making the biggest jump yet. And you know how it is with companies. I mean, I don't know what budgets are like and product and quality control and this and that, but basically they said, look, unless there's a defect, we can't really do the wear and tear thing anymore.
Mm.
And I don't know how Kirsten heard about this, but she approached me and she's like, I don't care if you run over your cymbals with a truck. And I thought, I can't argue with that, you know. But what was funny is that the cymbals that I learned to play on, which I mean, it was all my dad's gear. It was like a relic. I mean, down to the very flimsy flat bass hardware, but half of the setup was Peisty. They were
Hmm.
old 602s, and then the other half were just old blackened looking Avitas
Yeah.
Zildjians.
Oh man. Yeah.
So, and we all have drum heroes who play both Peisty or Zildjian. So just, having the opportunity was a great joy. But yeah, I've been with Zildjian ever since I was 16.
Okay. Yeah. And
20 years.
yeah, 20 years. How about that?
Yeah.
And I remember, I guess maybe she gave me a heads up that you'd be there, or I knew you'd be there. And I just remember congratulating you, and you were very, and understandably just reserved, because this had to be just such an overwhelming thing. But do you feel, looking back at this, I wonder, like, I know, when I was younger, I feel like we're a little bit more fearless when we're young. Like, were you able to just kind of almost like let it roll off your shoulders that you're going to be playing in front of hundreds or maybe 1,000 people, and just
Yeah, to a
not let it get to
degree.
you?
To a degree. I mean, the drums are a phenomenal instrument for those with a semblance of stage fright, I'd imagine. Now, I need to say, I've never had stage fright, but I
Mhm.
would imagine that those who do feel comforted in being shielded by their instrument, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
And I am grateful for the fact that I started playing in my brother's high school band as young as I did, because I felt like when you start that soon or that early, performing gets embedded into your DNA and it actually becomes a place of comfort. So as long as I was with behind the drums, I could do what I needed to do and it was comfortable for me. So I didn't have, this was before I discovered what anxiety was, but I definitely didn't have it back then. And it was just, okay, this is my set time. We did sound check, so
Hmm.
you're up. Okay, I'm gonna do it. And I'm gonna do what I practiced, and there we go. That's how it went. And I just recall thinking, okay, I nailed it. It was better than I practiced it, and I'm happy. I did my job.
That's great. That's great.
But yeah, it's funny though, because I live in LA now. I'm from San Diego originally, which is my where my parents still live. And whenever I visit down there, I still have the award in my childhood bedroom. So I'm just like, that's
That's
cool,
great.
so
Yeah,
it
that's
sticks
so
out to
cool.
me.
Yep, yep. No, and that what you say makes sense, because I think I was trying to get to that. I guess I kind of didn't really maybe say it right, but I feel like when we're younger, we're able to handle that sort of pressure maybe a little easier. But it sounds like you've really got this balance anyway, and I'm guessing because you've been playing so long, that you've managed whatever quote anxiety there might be. But like, I feel like for me now at my old age, when I go up and play in front of people, especially if there's drummers in the audience, I'm nervous as shit. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
like, man, like, oh, there's that guy out there, and he's gonna check everything I do. But like, when we were kids, I feel like it didn't matter if there were a couple of girls in the audience. That's all that mattered to me. Just
Mhm.
like. You know,
Well, it's funny. I mentioned this is before I discovered anxiety, and at this point, the show is the actual point of comfort. It's leading up to the show that I can't stand, especially the
yeah.
hour and a half where you're just constantly staring at the clock and you know
Mhm.
this thing is pending and it's what you're there for and it's just a waiting game. It's the hurry up and wait game that I've learned to despise in my older age.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the performance is always the point of relief.
Yeah, yep. No, that's what you're saying. And I think is so key too to people watching, and drummers that aspire to do what you do, understanding life on the road is hurry up and wait, lobby call at whatever time of the morning, and you're going to the airport or getting on a bus, and then you get to the gig or the hotel or the venue, whatever, and then you're just waiting to play, and it's,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's a,
not I mean look, fortunately things do get a bit more luxurious depending on the popularity of the band you may be playing with, but you can never get rid of the hurry up and wait. You can only just hurry up and wait in a better place.
yes, yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Man, let's talk about as part of all these congratulations, some of the things besides the Modern Drummer Award that you got. Um, Youngest person ever to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is
Mhm.
just ridiculous. That is so cool.
Well, thank you.
Congratulations on that. Yeah, yeah,
I appreciate that.
and with Nine Inch Nails too, no less. I mean, like
Mhm.
with really like a band that like has just you must be so proud of that just to have that.
I am. I just, and I'm not saying this to be self-deprecating anyway. I feel an honor to have this trophy over here with my name on it, and it was one of those things that as a kid you have your heroes. They've been inducted into this thing and you think, okay, one day I'd like to do that, and perhaps you picture yourself way down the road, and the fact that it happened as a 32-year-old, and as you said, just being the youngest to do it, at least until somebody beats me, it's a cool thing to be proud of. Now the only thing I have to say is that Nine Inch Nails was legendary far before I joined. So I can only imagine the sense of pride that Trent has, for example, because that is his baby that he created and he
Sure. Yeah.
grew over a tremendous career. That being said, it's shocking to me that I've been a part of this band for 15 years, but it's just, there's no doubt that the band would have been there without me, but I'm happy to be a part of it, I guess is my long-winded way of saying that, but very grateful nonetheless.
Well, that's that's really, I mean, that's huge of you to say it that way. And I have great respect for you, Ilan, for saying that. And but
Thank you.
I think it speaks volumes that Trent wanted you to be there. I mean that was, I mean, he had to have made the call, right, to have you be inducted. So
That is true. Yeah. In fact, little side story, got a quick call from him before that was announced. And he said, look, Nine Inch Nails is being inducted into the Hall of Fame. It's going to be announced next week. This was probably just before the weekend had started, whenever it was. And he said, I just want you to know that I'm trying to get you and a handful of the guys inducted alongside me as well. So I just want you to know that because when they announce the news, it'll probably just be me, but I'm working for this and I think you deserve it, which, whether I agree or not, is irrelevant. The fact that he came forth and said, I want you to be there
yeah,
and be inducted as part of it meant a lot and would have meant a lot regardless of it going through. But of course, I'm glad it did. And it was a great cheery moment in the midst of COVID Armageddon. So
yeah,
that was a bright spot in that dark time. So it was good.
that's great. Yeah, and I'll just say again, yeah, I mean, I have to think that the fact that it was Trent and that he has a lot of juice with the Rock Hall was, you know, I don't know if they would have, if it was some other artist, if they would have went, well, we're inducting you and it's, or or the band or
Mm.
but yeah, but anyway, kudos to him and kudos to you for that all
It could have
happening. And
it could have been that the Red Hot Chili Peppers set a dangerous precedent because I think they inducted anybody who's ever played a note with them a few years before that. So,
That's oh man. What else, man? There's like you get all these accomplishments that are just, I mean, I think I saw too. I know you performed at Woodstock. One of
oh
the was it?
God.
Yeah, I know. And it was obviously
Yeah,
not Woodstock 69. Was it not, was it 99? Was that
it was 99
the 30th
and
anniversary? Yeah.
oh, it's just one of those things. It's become a little anecdote, a little
Yeah.
bullet point that people mention, which is totally fine. I mean, it is what it is. It was the summer of 5th grade for me, and my brother's high school band had won a sort of competition, and the prize was to be the first band to open up Woodstock. Now, here's what's funny, and I don't, like I said, it's not something. It's not, certainly not a bad thing. It's just a lifetime ago in a band that I hardly have any memory of just because of how long it's been. But what I do recall that experience is that was it's some I want to say some kind of airfield or some kind of field, and the two main stages were at opposite ends of this
Mm.
colossal place. And in between the two of them was this hangar. So we played technically the first, but on neither of these main stages. We just played in this hangar. And that's what that was. Very first band. It was a big crowd at the time. But the funniest thing about all of this is that all these years later, I was in a conversation with Matt from Muse. Those guys have become friends.
Hmm.
And they were talking about, yeah, we played on this emerging artist stage at Woodstock. And I was like, wait a second, you guys played that? They're like, yeah, it was very strange. And I was like, I played that too. Very first band. I was like, but I must have been 11 years old at the time or 10 years old or whatever it was. And he was saying, I may have seen you because I remember thinking, what is a kid doing here? And then all this time later, they're one of the biggest bands on the planet and have been for who knows how long. And just the fact that we had been around
Yeah.
each other completely unbeknownst to us at the time is just a very, very funny thing. But yeah, I guess it's strange that sort of little factoid about me is I don't want to say it's taken on a life of its own. I'm just shocked that it has stuck, I guess
Yeah.
is a way
No,
to put it.
I guess it's one of those things yeah, it sticks. I mean, Woodstock is, has it, obviously it's not Woodstock 69 because it was many
Hmm.
years before, you were playing drums,
Yeah.
so to speak. But still, I mean, you were there, you were at Woodstock and you were the youngest musician in the first band to play there. So
Yeah. There you go. Yes.
yeah. So I picked it up somewhere. I think I saw that somewhere
It's
I
out
thought it
there.
was,
It's probably, yeah, line one of Wikipedia, probably. I don't know. But yeah. Yeah.
oh, too funny. So I know you're a multi-instrumentalist. Um, you play, I mean, do you play all the instruments on your own recordings? I know you play keyboards.
I do.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
In fact, funny enough, the with the exception of vocals, piano is the final sort of mainstay instrument that I picked up. Being the youngest of three boys, well, they may have started with the drums as I picked them up. They gravitated towards guitar and bass, so I had access to those, and
Mhm.
I followed a similar path of learning my first riff or my first lick, and then becoming obsessed with wanting to learn more and more and more, and getting better and better at it. But it wasn't until about 15, probably, that via classical guitar, I then sort of had this epiphany that the piano must have been the grand master of these instruments. And I told my parents, I want to learn how to play classical piano, and they thought it was a phase because it was all classic rock at that point.
Mhm.
And I was like, no, I really want to learn how to play piano. And they're like, well, we have this old keyboard in the garage. Why don't you play with that for a little bit and see if you still like it? Learned a little bit. They got me my first little kind of digital piano that was weighted, and then I really took off from there. But it's funny, we did our we did our sound check about at this point an hour ago, and while I was in the Zoom waiting room, I was practicing piano. So there you go.
Wow. Okay, so that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you is because I know you're really an accomplished piano player, and how I'm always curious. No, really, with someone who's truly a multi instrumentalist like yourself, like how much time do you devote to like playing drums and play? And I'm sure it varies on how you feel and whether you're composing a track or something. But in terms of like enjoyment, do you get more enjoyment out of playing piano or?
It really depends. And while this may be disappointing to some listeners who happen to be drummers, when I'm home, I don't really play much as far as the drums are concerned. And I mean that for the sake of just sitting down and playing. And
Yeah.
there's a manifold answer or reason to that. One is this is like a little hybrid DWE kit that I have here for some MIDI recording with songs, and just if I need to work on something, I can have stuff to hit. But I don't have a kit at home because my neighbors would absolutely have me have me whacked just based on volume. But jokes aside, when I'm on tour and playing drums, I don't get to do any other stuff really. I don't get to
Mhm.
play piano. I don't get to play guitar or bass unless I haul one around with me. And when I'm home, I kind of play when I have sessions. I play when I need to record for myself. And then occasionally I will get that itch to just go and play. But that is more of a rarity. And I see my home time as the opportunity to write a lot of music, and I just don't happen to write from the drums generally.
Mhm.
So it's piano, bass, guitar,
Yeah.
and they're just much easier. I mean, I have a guitar on the couch. I have a guitar right here. I've got a keyboard there, and
Yeah.
it's easy to kind of just dive into it that way. But yeah, I don't have a regiment that I follow, although I will say within the last couple of months, I have tried to really set time aside for the piano. And my reasoning for that is that I've been getting into film composition over the last couple of years. And as you can imagine, a lot of that comes from playing the piano, especially if you're working out parts and orchestration and whatnot. And I just figured that learning more at the piano and having my fingers in shape could only benefit me in other actual work down the
Yeah.
line.
Sure.
So it's it's something that I force myself to do, and I enjoy it. So I don't want to use the word force in a negative way. But I also wanted to force myself to do it for the sake of finally getting decent at sight reading. Because while I was okay at it drumming wise, I was so eager to learn to play the piano that I took what David taught me from notation. I bought a beginner's piano book. I taught myself the grand staff and where the notes line up. And then I would pick a piece of music I want to learn how to play. I would learn a bar at a time, memorize it, and then move on. So while my technical facility improved, my sight reading is practically non-existent. So
Mhm.
that's my one real regret as a musician. I kind of wish I had the force. Okay, you got to practice your sight reading because your teacher's coming next week. But I had a different path for me.
Yeah, yeah, you did. But you know what? I would bet you everything that if you had the time and you decided to just put the time into it, you'd be a master at it. It's obvious because you know,
Well, thank you. I just because you have to, regardless of what your technical ability is, you most people generally sight read a few notches below that. So it's not fun, but it
mm,
is what it is.
yeah, yeah. And so how did you I'm curious to know how you sort of moved into doing like film work and all. Was there like one situation that sort of opened that door for you? Did you get called to do a session with a producer? And then I'm just curious how, because I mean, you've really like taken this path that's been incredible, really. From
Well, thank you. Well, it's a couple of different things. Now, the majority of the credits that I have as a performer on scores are me playing drums. So I was
Mhm.
hired to go in. It's one of the very few times I've actually had to read music on the job as a
Yeah.
drummer.
Yeah.
But I played on a few scores, and that was that. Not really different to being hired to play on any other kind of session, other than I had paper in front of me. But as a would-be composer, when I picked up the piano, my love of orchestral music really blossomed beyond just the piano. I loved, I mean, I suppose piano concertos were the sort of gateway because it was a piano with an orchestra, but then I was just enjoying symphonic music. And in hindsight, really, I've always been a giant Star Wars and Indiana Jones fan, and obviously the music to those is
John
phenomenal.
Williams.
And it,
Yeah.
yeah, which by the way, if you haven't seen the documentary, please do on
Yeah.
Disney
Yeah.
Plus. It is excellent. But in hindsight, jokes aside, I really do think that that is part of my attachment to those movies as a kid. But it was something I always wanted to do. And as time progressed and I began to buy synthesizers and get into programming and soundscape and these other tools of the trade that have become more and more prominent within film scoring, I just realized that that was pretty much the only world in which all of these musical interests of mine could feed off of one another. So the pandemic really had me zero in on what I would do and what I could pursue in a non-touring life because I was touring up until the day that the country shut down.
Mhm.
I literally showed up to a venue, nobody was loading in. I was like, okay, tour's over, everyone go home.
Oh man.
And when we realized as humanity that the pandemic was not going to be over by July, I thought, okay, this is my opportunity to have an unprecedented amount of time on my hands because my life always oscillated between touring and writing and recording. So when you took touring out of the equation,
Hmm.
I thought, okay, how am I going to make the most of this time? And film scoring was the thing that I pursued.
And you had the studio set up already at home, so you were ready to
I
go,
did.
really, more or less. Yeah.
I did, yeah. So this is my little kind of writing room at home, and I know you can't really see it all, but I've got a piano and synths and computer and microphones and whatever it is I need to create, I
Hmm.
can do that. And I have a lockout about 25 minutes from here that has the actual drums and amps and the real noisemakers.
Yeah. Great.
So depending
That's
on what I
perfect.
need to do, I decide where I need to work, and that's
Yeah.
that.
So just to jump back a second, Ilan, I know you mentioned your dad's a drummer,
Mhm.
and musical family, and obviously your dad was probably your first influence, probably or close
Mhm.
to it.
Definitely.
And yeah, maybe just talk a little bit about how because your playing style where you lead with your left hand, but
Mhm.
you're a right-handed person, right? I mean, you're pretty much for the
The
most part
only
right-handed.
things I do left-handed are hit the hi-hat and write, which may explain my appalling penmanship. At least that's the excuse that I'd like to use. But that's it. Everything else is right-handed. I play guitar, bass, swing a tennis racket, kick a ball, throw, everything right-handed. So it's
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
strange. I don't know. I don't know if that is necessarily ambidextrous, but as far as the drums are concerned, as you and I actually discussed before going live here, you had a similar thing. Uh,
I, yeah. Yeah.
so
And
what?
they call it mixed handedness, as I've learned, which means that you do different things. Yeah. And I'll just quickly share, but this is about you, not about me. But I started like you, I started playing a right-handed kit because everybody I knew, I was self-taught. Everybody set their drums up right-handed, so I played.
Hmm.
But my left hand naturally wanted to lead, so I
Hmm.
played the hi-hat with my left hand. And one day, a friend of mine who was a drummer who had studied with like Alan Dawson, and he was a couple of years, same age, but a couple of years further along in his development,
Hmm.
came to my house and he said, "Wait a minute, you're playing." The hi-hat with your left hand, and you need to switch your drums around and play the bass drum with your left foot and cross over and play this way. So I did, and I was able to develop that and hence become a
Hmm.
left-handed drummer. But I wish I had stayed with it like you did and just developed my left side on a right-handed
Yeah,
kit.
it's
But
a it's a strange thing. Although I do like this mixed-handedness
Yeah,
title for it. It seems like a fancy way of whatever works.
right, right.
But yeah, there was no real thought behind it because it wasn't even something that my dad had thought of, and I don't even think he was aware of that being possible, honestly.
Hmm.
It's funny now that in hindsight you see people like Dennis Wilson played open-handed, which so
Right.
it must have been something that people have seen whether they realize it or not.
Yeah, yeah. Billy
But it was
Cobham plays
Billy
that
Cobham.
way.
There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
But as you and I were saying, even when we see open-handed players or left-handed players, it still looks wrong to us, even
It
though that's what
does.
we look like when we play. So he just left me to practice a beat that he taught me, and it was a very simple discovery that the hi-hat was closer to my left hand. That was it. It's not that I was struggling to do it right-handed. I just thought, what sense does this make? This it's much easier.
Yeah.
And when he came in to listen to whatever it was that I was practicing, it was a little perplexing, I think, because he thought it sounds right, but it doesn't look right. But I don't know what to do about this. So I don't know how long after that it was, but he took me to a Dave Weckl clinic, and when it came to the Q&A, he asked, "What do I do with my kid who's hitting the hi hat with his left hand?" And Weckl said, "Let him do whatever comes naturally," and that was it. It was never mentioned again. The thing, though, is that at that time I was playing two toms up top and two floor toms. So the ride has to kind of live over the floor tom generally,
Yeah.
unless you play a little higher up there. But you know the cliche of you start playing drums and the drums get bigger and bigger and more pieces, and then they start going the other way around. You get to a simpler kit. So when I lost one of the toms and I moved the ride into the correct spot, I was like, oh my God, this is so comfortable. You
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah.
over the floor tom, it's a little awkward. I kind of felt
Right.
like Alan White or something. It didn't seem right. But the comfort of having that, I think, really solidified more so this idea that, okay, when I'm on the hi-hat, I play with my left hand, and when I move to the ride, I play with my right. And I
Wow.
did used to have a ride over to my left, kind of tilted. I
Hmm.
guess is kind of what Mike Borden does.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
un-
Mike Board.
Unbeknownst to me at the time, but things evolve and things change, and I've tried to just say, okay, if I can do it one way, I got to be able to do it the other.
Yeah. It's amazing when I'm gonna play a little video of you playing and seeing you play so comfortably leading left hand on the hi-hat and then playing the ride cymbal. I mean, it's incredible. It really is.
Thank you.
Yeah. In fact, if you're okay with this, I didn't mention this. I don't want to.
Uh-oh.
I'm kind of surprising you. Um,
Uh-oh.
I found a clip from, and I was at this event as well, the Guitar Center drum offs in 2011,
Yeah.
and there's a video of you playing. I
Mm.
thought I'd play a little bit of that if that's
Sure. Go for it.
let's do it. Okay. Yeah. And I was there that night.
I often enough, okay, unless it's like a Buddy Rich masterclass of a drum solo, I'm generally pretty uninterested in them. And I will even throw Moby Dick into that. Okay. My favorite parts of Moby Dick are the riff at the beginning and the end. Yes, I'll watch John Bonham tie his shoes or drink a beer. So I've logged many, many hours listening and watching Moby Dick, but it was not my favorite part of his playing. So I didn't want a drum solo to be boring. And the only experience I had apparently was 10 years prior to that at the Modern Drummer Festival that we were talking about.
Hmm.
So I wanted to try to do something a little different because it does, in a way, add a framework, namely a tempo to play to. And
Right.
I thought that was fun, and I thought it was a cool challenge, and I was very well versed in playing to a click, especially with Nine Inch Nail stuff and recording. So I thought, okay, I haven't seen anybody do this, so hopefully it's interesting enough. Now, when I say interesting enough, out of my 15-minute time slot here, I spent 6 or 7 minutes doing a solo, a couple minutes doing a sort of drum duet with a friend, and one of my brothers was playing bass. And then I spent the latter half of the performance actually playing guitar and singing. So I was very aware of not having a boring 15-minute drum performance. And I'm not saying that all 15-minute drum performances are boring by any means, but
I
I
know
thought,
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
how much can I possibly pack into this 15 minutes? And that's what I did. So it was a lot of fun, and I think it's a cool exercise, even if people want to try it at home. It's playing to a click without playing to a click. And you can have this thing to feed off of and play in and around as opposed to just focusing on staying in time.
yeah, yeah,
So I thought that was a fun approach, and
yeah.
people still mention it to me 14 years later, coming up, or whatever it is.
I'm one of those people screaming, by the way, in the audience. That's me screaming the loudest.
I haven't watched this in who knows how long. I mean, why would I, right? But
Yeah.
it's a fun flashback.
And when you start getting into this stuff, this is
I wish that was 2 minutes instead of six.
No, man. I kept looking for a spot where I could, abbreviate, but I couldn't. There were no places where it was ever a spot where, people would have felt we would have missed out on it. And that was that. Can I just, so you weren't playing a double pedal, right? I mean, that was
No,
all, that's all.
that
And
was
do
all
you
one.
always play
Yeah.
that with just one? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, I did have a double pedal at the set, but unless I am playing with a band that requires it, so Nine Inch Nails has a couple of spots that require double pedal. Danny Elfman, which is something I've been doing for the last year and a half or so, has some double pedal in there as well. Other than that, I'm a single pedal guy.
Yeah, man. I love it. You make it work. I mean, you
Thank you.
prove that if you have the chops and that right foot, man, you don't need a double pedal. Our
I
hero, John
attribute
Bonham. Yeah.
I attribute it all to him, and
Yeah.
of course, you saw me sneaking some of those triplets in there. I had to.
I loved it. I loved it. And I love that you opened the solo. It was, and I'm not saying you were stealing it, but I think it was almost like an homage to rock and roll. The way you opened it, you started like a ba 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 kind of thing, and it reminded me of it
You
anyway.
know
Just to,
what? I never even thought about that, but quick tangent, okay, since you mentioned
yeah,
rock
yeah,
and roll.
yeah.
Do you know where the one is officially in that intro?
Simon Phillips once, of course, he would know, and he once explained it to me. I've always just played it by ear and found
Same.
it. Yeah, right. I mean, I never really thought about where the one, but tell me, please, and for all the
Well,
listeners.
well, I didn't discover this. I had some, it was Danny Carey being interviewed by Rick Beato, and it popped up on my Instagram feed. And he was saying that he was in a band with Jeff Buckley before they were both who they were. And Jeff
Wow.
Buckley is one of my favorites. So I was
Yeah.
immediately enthralled by the story. And I know Buckley was a huge Led Zeppelin fan. And according to
Hmm.
this story, which you can find on YouTube, I'm sure, he was saying that Buckley came into whatever their rehearsal space was excited, saying that he finally found out where the one was in rock and roll. So it's like, well, I've always thought it's a bit of a strange intro, but then when you realize that the first couple of beats or the first few beats are a lead in, it all makes sense. So without further ado, let's say we're counting one, two, da 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 one, da 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 two, da 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 one, two, ba ba da 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. And my entire life, I had no idea.
Yeah. Oh my God. And I thought that I thought Simon had told me that it's the melody, like a sort of famous melody of something, like a
I've heard
shit.
"Good Golly, Miss Molly."
That's
That's what I've heard, but
okay.
it just has this like old swing thing to
Yeah.
it when you think of
Yep.
da 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 da.
Yep.
There you
And all
go.
that
My whole
and
life, I never knew.
me either. And and that all makes sense to me, Elon, because Bonzo being like he was such a fan of of jazz and of of old rock and roll and all that. Like you could see him sort of tipping his hat to something like Good Golly Miss Molly or something or
Mm,
some oh yeah, somebody said Bill Blystein says you keep a knocking.
mm,
And maybe that's what I'd heard or something that it's and then
uh-huh.
when I it was Simon that broke it down and explained it. I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, I can hear that, but um,
Simon Phillips is an open-handed drummer, isn't he?
that's right. Simon's another one. It's like,
And
yeah.
I first heard about Simon Phillips through coming back to David Oskinen because he was, I guess, intrigued by my open-handedness, my mixed-handedness, and he
Yeah.
told me about Simon Phillips. So, so many
Yeah.
full circles were coming here.
I know. I know. It's amazing. Well, I want to make sure we talk about this great book um, because I think people need to know about this. And I wanted to ask you, like, how you even,
Hmm.
with all you do, how you found the time to even do this book. I'm so impressed by that because this was a
Well,
major
thank you.
undertaking.
It's funny you mention that because I have procrastinated on this for many, many years. Now, I use the term procrastinate loosely because it wasn't until I finally decided to actually sit down and do it that you could technically be procrastinating. But let's just say it's an idea that I threw around for a long while. And I suppose the thing that really made me commit to it when I did, which was sometime last year, uh, we were expecting our first kid. Still only have one, but this is a big
Congrats.
life change. Thank you. There's a big life changing moment coming underway. And of course, you can only anticipate how much things are going to change. And knowing that I would have even less time on my hands, I thought I have to do
Yeah.
this now while I can. So I did it. And it was a great learning experience. And as we talked about earlier, it was a huge undertaking that I underestimated. Now, I love the challenge of it, and I think the undertaking was a little amplified just because of a tinge of OCD. And what I mean by that is, okay, let's say you know what you want to write in this section. Okay, I want to do a six-stroke roll section. And you write that first just because you're excited to do it. And you realize, okay, it's 10 exercises. Well, then you move on to the next one. You realize that should be 10 exercises because if they're not the same amount of exercises, that's going to make me feel uncomfortable forever. So I kind of set these parameters that did not need to be there. So that was a fun challenge because a big point of the book, although it was much longer than I would have ever anticipated, and I hope you agree with me. If you don't, please feel free to say so. I did not want there to be a lot of fat. I wanted it all to be very
Yeah.
useful and be a very obvious sort of platform to jump off of for people. Okay, you want to learn how to use paradiddles around the drum set? Here are 10 exercises, and here's what you can do with them if you so choose. I didn't want to do one of those, and albeit legendary books like Stick Control
Hmm.
or one of the Garibaldi books where it's about every permutation that you can possibly do and every variation. I did not want to do that because as a kid, although I loved reading these books, I always wanted to get to the next thing. I didn't
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to just, keep displacing one beat or one accent. And those things are phenomenal. I'm certainly not downplaying them by any means, but they're great for coordination,
Hmm.
getting a better sense of rhythm, and just showing you what's possible.
Right.
But I wanted this to be a book about here's how I use them, here's why I know they're useful, and here are ways that you can make them useful within your playing. So I covered a lot of ground. And the shocking thing, talk about underestimating, when I initially spoke to the guys at Hudson, I just had a sort of a one sample chapter and a table of contents. And they're like, this table of contents is definitely two books, maybe three worth of material. So why don't you just do the first four chapters as your book? So I turned those chapters into sections. And within those sections, I subdivided them into a total of 40 chapters. But yeah, I did not think this was going to be a 184-page undertaking
Yeah.
or whatever it was. And initially, I did it by hand. I like to write things down, and then the
That's
whole
great.
engraving on my end, and then them engraving on their end, and then going back and forth, proofing everything. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the way I feel when I record a song of mine. By the time I'm done writing it and I record it and I go through every track and every harmony, by the time it's mixed, I never want to hear it ever again. But when the box of promo copies arrived at my front door, I was very proud, actually seeing it and holding it in my hand.
I'm sure you were. You had to be. And so what you're saying, Elon, is that there's going to be maybe a part two and part three? Is it safe to
If
say?
anyone buys the first one and enjoys it, I'd love to do a second one.
Great, man.
But yeah, because one thing I will say is that there isn't a single groove in that book. It's all about rudiments at the set. Now, I talk about how you can use them, whether they be jumping off points for solos, or you can cut each of these exercises into fills. And I really go through all of the uses, or at least the mindset one should have, because I wanted the text to be conversational in the sense as if I was sitting across from you or somebody giving them a drum lesson.
I see.
That's how I
Yep.
wanted the tone to read. But that means that I have a whole other book worth of grooves and
Hmm.
ideas there that I would love to do at some point. But
Well, that's
Yeah.
well, right now I can tell you, well, at least I saw them earlier. Rob Wallace and Joe Bergamini from Hudson were and probably still are watching. So guys,
Thanks,
yeah,
guys. I owe those gentlemen a lot. And
great guys.
speaking about Joe in particular, so this was an interesting way of he and I meeting. Mark Juliana, who is a fantastic drummer,
Oh
I
man.
had no idea that he took lessons from Joe Bergamini at some point. So Mark and I had met and have many mutual friends, and I forgot who it was I spoke to, but they said you should talk to Mark because he put a book out. Mark put me in touch with Joe, and then here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, it's like you say, it's just that all these different, you know, full circle or just 6 degrees of separation, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and I have to say that your idea to have Ronnie Vanucci write the foreword was just brilliant because it's just I think it sets the tone. Like you said, you wanted to have it feel like you were sitting across giving a lesson. And
Hmm.
Ronnie, you know, we love Ronnie. We were talking about Ronnie earlier, and I think he sets such a comfortable tone right out of the gate to where it doesn't feel like a like you're going to be overwhelmed with this book. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? He
Yeah.
makes it's very user friendly.
Well, he is such a good guy, a genuine friend, and as you mentioned, when we had met when I was a very young kid, I was very shy, and I still am to a degree. I mean, I'm much more of a introvert, generally speaking,
Mm.
but I still have this thing where I hate to feel as if I'm inconveniencing anybody. And when you have a certain level of comfort, that's one of the things that kind of falls by the wayside. So when Rob and Joe were asking me who I had in mind for a forward, Ronnie came to mind, but I consider him such a good friend to where it was a request of, look, I need you to do this for me. If you can't, I know you're busy. I can see your touring schedule in front. In fact, I think the Killers were doing a residency in Vegas at the time. But I asked and he came through, and that was great. But we've been very good friends for
Yeah.
probably 9, almost 10 years now. But such a good guy, an incredibly musical drummer, and he's also a trained drummer. You know, not that you need to
Yeah.
be trained, but he can read. He knows his rudiments. He warms up. He does his stuff. But a very unique guy, very unique drummer, and I'm very happy that he's a part of that book forever.
Yeah, he sure is. No, and I totally hear what you're saying about Ronnie too. When you hear him play, he's a rocker, but he's got that sort of disciplined, you know, he's got technique. You can hear it in there, and that
Yeah,
I love that about him. You know, and you're the same way. You've got you know, it's like you play really loose and free, and with such a genuine like rock approach, you know, given all your influences. I'm sure your dad had a lot to do with that, like exposing you to the music he listened to. And but then you're also obviously schooled, like you know, you can really, you
yeah.
know,
Well,
rein it in.
a thing that I'm in hindsight I love is I am a big proponent of all sorts of, I mean, education in general, but musical education. I always found it hilarious. I mean, I don't know how it is with drummers per se, but you meet kids at school or people in their bands, they play guitar and bass, and they don't want to learn music theory because they don't want it to hinder their incredible fountain of creativity. They have this nonchalance and this sort of disrespect for actually knowing how things should and could be done. But I'm also equally a proponent of knowing the rules to break the rules, so to speak. But being a self-taught musician to begin with and then eventually getting lessons, I feel like I had and have a unique perspective on the learning experience, therefore the teaching experience, because
Mhm.
I mean, the closest thing I've had to a real job was giving drum lessons as a 14, 15-year-old, you know, after school. I'd give kids some lessons and some guitar lessons as well. But just finding a way of making somebody understand something, how to switch the perspective so that it suddenly clicks. And you certainly don't need to be schooled to be fantastic. I'm not saying that
Sure.
I'm fantastic, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's no ceiling as long as you're willing to learn. Whether you learn from reading or by listening, it does not matter. But it certainly doesn't hurt to know both.
Hmm.
And I just felt like that was a unique perspective and something that I'm happy to have done on sort of my path because I've never taken a guitar lesson, for example, in my life, but I've got a lot that I've learned from both ear and books. And I mean, these days with YouTube, it's the
Yeah.
wealth of knowledge out there is pretty phenomenal. And I did not have that. It was either, I mean, I'm not saying, back in the day where information wasn't available, but you had to go buy it
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really spend some time with it, whether it was tapes or books. And that's what I did.
Yeah. No, I was going to say you're still a very young man, but you're from the generation, excuse me, before everything was, out in the open on the internet where you could just push a button and get it. And
Hmm.
you had to like really know how to, you know, sit down and practice and learn the instrument that way. And
Hmm.
me and your dad go back to when we used to have to put the needle down on the record and, lift it up again and
Exactly.
so,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
but I just have to say too, I think it's great that you've done this book because you're so influential to young drummers that I think you're instilling in their minds that, hey, it's cool to go and have a drum teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because what I'm thinking of right now is I think, particularly as a soloist, I think Buddy Rich is untouchable.
Yeah,
What that guy was able to do on a 4 or 5 piece kit, and I say four because I know he pretty much used the second floor tom as a towel holder.
that's
Okay.
right.
He
That's right.
couldn't read music.
That's right.
And the main book that David, Oscar, and I went through was the Modern Interpretation of Snare Drum Rudiments, which was it was based on Buddy Rich. He was on the cover playing that Ludwig kit. But this is a book based on his skills and what he did, but he couldn't read music. And again, I think that's the pinnacle of
Hmm.
drumming as a solo instrument. But the most important thing is wanting to learn. You don't need to learn certain things, but there's never any downside to learning something. So if there's one thing I can instill upon somebody, it's that.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Well, as we start to kind of near the end of our time, I thought we'd play a little bit of your music. Um,
Okay.
I have queued up ready to go. I thought we'd play 24-hour fix.
Okay.
And
Now we just listening to a taster. We're gonna get to the first chorus and then get back to chatting, or
whatever
what do we
I
do?
could play the whole song if you want, or we could just play a little, whatever. What would you like me to do? You tell me.
You know what? Let's get to the so after the first chorus, there's a fun little interlude guitar solo. We'll get to that part.
Okay.
But I guess before we play it, so this is a solo song. For a long time, I released solo music under the moniker The New Regime. So I
Right.
wanted it to be presented as a band, but I wrote, played, and sang everything on the recordings. Post or in the middle of the pandemic, not knowing how long it would last, I didn't want to feel stagnant or as if I was kind of waiting to pick up where I left off because I didn't know how long that would be. So the pandemic made me feel like releasing music under my own name would feel like a both a way of continuing and a way of feeling like there was a fresh start.
All right. Yeah.
So this was a single that I'd put out maybe a year or two ago. So it's me playing everything. And this is one of the more sort of straightforward rock songs, if you will. Not a lot of
Yeah.
overdubbing going on, just guitar track, bass track, vocals, all that fun stuff. So it's pretty bare.
Let's play it. So we'll play it through the guitar solo, then we'll
Mhm.
come back.
All
Should we
right,
do
sure.
that? All
Let's
right,
do
let's
it.
do that. And because I have some questions to ask you. So
Anything.
we'll play it and then we'll come back in just a little bit. Here we go. 24-hour fix. Ilan Rubin.
I took a walk in the evening with the sun
Right there, okay?
Yeah.
All right. So that's you playing all the instruments, as you say.
Yes.
Unbelievable. All right, let's just start with that. You're a great singer.
Well,
What a
thank you.
great, yeah, man. What and but you don't consider yourself. I mean, do you think much about that? I'm just as a drummer that sings. I'm just curious how much weight you put into that part of your composition, into your creativity. Like where
As a singer,
as a singer, where do you? Yeah.
so so being completely honest here, I do love to sing, but singing was a thing that I made myself do at around 18 years old. And it was because I had this epiphany where I thought, okay, I can play, just being frank here. I was like, I can play the drums, guitar, bass, piano well. But if I can't do the most important thing to complete the package, to write songs and be totally self-sufficient, then what's the point? So I forced myself to sing. And like with anything, I've improved as time has gone on. And I love to do it, but it was the sort of final piece of the puzzle.
Wow. Well, and did it come pretty naturally, Alon? Did it feel like it once you got comfortable, like as far as
Well, here's what's funny is that I had to learn a lot, and coming back to me being shy, especially when I was younger, I really did some things as a singer that kind of bit me in the ass, and I'll elaborate. I was so shy as a new singer that when I would write songs, I would quietly write the melodies in falsetto, just with the guitar, and I'd mumble
ah,
things in falsetto. And then when it came time to step up to the mic and sing, I was at the top of my range. So I then put myself in a corner where I had to learn a bit more about technique. And don't get me wrong, I'm not Pavarotti by any means, but I thought, okay, now I need to find a way to do this a little more properly so that I can actually do it. And then you start learning things about which keys and registers. I mean, I know I can comfortably, powerfully hit a B flat or a B above middle C. Anything beyond that is a bit of a crapshoot, and I try to stay away from that point of the register. And I keep that in mind for harmony and
hmm.
high points of range and whatnot. But yeah, you cannot be shy and sing. It's you there's nothing to hide behind. You can be shy and play drums, and you may
Hmm.
not hear it when you strike the drum, or same with the guitar or whatever it may be. But in a voice, you can hear it. It's everything you're feeling is inherent in the quality of the tone that your voice produces. So I had to learn a lot there.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. I'm so impressed, really. Not surprisingly, and I have to, with that song and all of like the new regime stuff, and I just have to give a shout out to my son,
Ooh,
John
yes.
Jr. Yeah, who's a huge fan of yours, by the way. He's a drummer, and
Oh,
he's
thank you.
I have a son and a daughter, and you're right in between their ages. He's 37 and my daughter's 35.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and I told him weeks ago when we first started talking about this that you're going to be on the show, and he was so excited. He's not watching now because he's working, but he'll no doubt watch
Mm.
the YouTube. But anyway, but you've been a real inspiration to him too, just in terms of your musicality, and he's
Well,
always
thank you.
yeah, I mean, when I told him that I knew you from all those years back, he'll say to me, "Dad, have you checked out what he's done, lately with this and with, so anyway,
Well, I
and
appreciate that. Tell him I appreciate that.
I sure
And
will. Yeah.
in listening to this song in particular, I said it was probably the most sort of straightforward rock song that I've done, and it's pretty bare in terms of the instrumentation. If you wouldn't mind, though, take it to about the last minute of the song. I
Sure.
do this kind of jam section, and of course, playing all the instruments myself. I think you'd probably appreciate that I kind of go off into this jam, and the way I solidified the parts was I would loop these things in the studio to kind of come up with the idea, the sort of structure, even though that's kind of the antithesis of jamming. But there's there's a way I like to play bass, a way I like to play guitar and drums and so on and so forth. But to get all of that to feel as if it's guys jamming in a room,
Hmm.
it kind of has to have this ebb and flow, but it also has to be calculated. So keep that in mind, and
Okay.
then tell me what you think of that.
All right. Perfect. I'll maybe the last minute and 15 seconds. Is that cool?
Sure, I should do it. I think so.
Okay. I'll go back to 120 just to, I don't think anybody's going to mind listening to more of this song, Ilan.
Well,
Here we
thank you.
go. Okay. All right.
I'm sure it's no mystery to you by listening to that who my heroes are, but I
That's
did grow
okay.
up I did grow up listening to live albums and really seeing or hearing what the difference was between the recorded material and what could be done with it live. So I like to leave little sort of off ramps in my songs to where if I wanted to jam live or extend things, I have the ability to do that. And that was definitely, I don't usually write in little drum solos and big fills and jam sections, but this song I felt like to be authentic, it needed it.
Absolutely did. And you know what? I made a note here. I should have made a note. I should have mentioned this earlier, but you just touched on it. I made a note that says old soul. And that's what you remind me of. I just again I keep coming back. I think, the influences you had growing up from your parents, your dad and your brothers and stuff, obviously that
Mhm.
helped shape you. And but I think you get it. Like you're able to I think the best way for me to explain it is you could have gone on to be like one of those shredder drummers, that can play so well. You know what I mean? But like you've chosen
Thank
to
you.
use your superpowers for good. Like you're creating,
Uh,
you're writing good songs, great songs, and you're making music. I think that's so great, man. Like that's a
well,
great song.
thank you. It's what you just said is very, very true. And I just what not that the song's great. I'm going back a
No,
sentence,
it is
but
true.
the idea of a path I could have taken as a drummer that I'm glad I didn't. It wasn't for a few years where all I played were drums, but the thing that really got me interested in other instruments is that I felt like I was at a crossroads of sorts. I mean, everyone can always get better at something, but often enough, especially if you're treating an instrument as a soloist, better usually means more complex. And there
Hmm.
came a point with the drums where I was becoming less and less interested in that. I didn't want to have to get a cowbell on a left foot or a wood block and start learning clave because that was the next difficult thing I had to learn how to do.
Yeah,
A tremendous amount of respect for the people who do
of
that. But the
course.
thing
Yeah.
is, they like playing that music and they're likely part of an ensemble that does that. I didn't do that. So I thought like, okay, I can start getting into weird time signatures, although bands I play with got me into that territory. I mean, some of this Danny Elfman stuff is so all over the place, but
I'll bet. Yeah.
you know, that's another tangent. But I realized, or I decided that rather than getting into these more and more complex territories of drumming, it would be more exciting and beneficial overall to just get in at the ground level on other instruments. And the way all of that knowledge kind of helped me as a musician in those other respects, I think is priceless because one thing I will say is that when I play the bass like a bass player, not like a drummer who can play the bass. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have wanted to really put in the time to be able to do that. And the same goes for guitar. And I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but if you want to add more instrumentation to your arsenal and you put in the time to learn, that stuff, whether you realize it or not, will help your other instruments and the way everything kind of relates. So I feel like I spend a good time of a good portion of my ear listening to everything else that's going on around me rather than just focusing on playing.
yeah, yeah.
So it's all beneficial.
No, and I think that's what I was trying to touch on, Ilan, was that like you're a composer, obviously, and you're composing music that each instrument has a purpose, and you're not trying to create songs where you're, like I think it's great that in that song in particular, the drums have a purpose. They're the foundation of the band, and it's like you're supporting the song. You're doing the job that a drummer's supposed to do, which is supporting the song, and then all the other instruments do the same thing, and the sum of all those parts makes a great track.
Well,
You're
thank you.
welcome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah,
just ask, so
of
before
course.
we wrap it up, on that particular song, how did you layer the instruments? Did the drums go in last? Did you put like the guitar first as a
You mean for the final recording of the song?
yeah,
So I will always do drums first.
you always do drums first. Okay.
Always do drums first, just because I feel like, I mean, you and I both know it is the foundation, it is the backbone.
Right on.
So
Yeah.
for it to be as tight as it should be, everything needs to be built on top of that. So drums are always first, and then guitar or bass, depending. On
Hmm.
this, I decided to do guitar first, just because the guitar is almost more the rhythmic basis than the bass, only because, yes, the bass and guitar are both pumping along in eighth notes, but the bass then gets more syncopated in little
Hmm.
bass fills and whatnot, whereas the guitar is always straight.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, drums, guitar, bass, vocals,
Wow. Yeah.
and then percussion at the end.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
great. And for anybody at home watching, you can download this track. It's 24-hour fix, the single, and it's under Ilan's name, Ilan Rubin. And there's so much other great music we could get to, and we will do that in the future. I know I wanted to talk more about Nine Inch Nails, and just I didn't think we'd be able to get it all in, in just one episode. So we'll.
Anytime you have me, I'll be here. In fact, I was looking that you have gongs on the wall, and I want to know what kind of anchors you use for that. That seems a pretty heavy load there.
It is, and I had this. There's a woman that put all those cymbals and gongs up on the wall for me because I could have never done it. She specializes in that, and
Very
actually,
impressive.
the Zildjian gong up there was belonged to Jody Lynn Scott, who was the
Uh-huh.
percussionist for the Who for many years,
Oh,
and
very cool.
and that was used during the Quadrophenia tour, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, it
Very
cracked.
cool.
Yeah, so I
Uh-huh.
brought her a new one, and I took the cracked one, and I had all the band members sign it, and it's signed by all the members of the Who except Keith Moon, of course. But
Uh-huh.
so that's pretty cool, and
Wow.
yeah,
Very cool.
some memorabilia.
Well, we'll get into the the handyman stuff on the next episode.
All right, I could learn a lot from you on that. I'm sure you'll. Yeah, absolutely. But stick around if you would for 1 second.
I got time for you. No worries.
All right. Well, thank you guys, everybody, for watching. This has been so much fun today. Big hand for Ilan Rubin.
Thank you very much. Thank
Yeah,
you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
likewise too. Just a reminder, I'm here with Ilan Rubin, and go out and pick up his new book, Start Somewhere to Go Somewhere, available through Hudson. And Ilan, we guarantee, right, that if someone buys this book, they'll play just like you.
If not, you get your money back. I haven't cleared that with Hudson, but let's go with it.
Alright, I love it. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
All right, well, that's my show. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, leave me a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, all podcasts are available on all the podcast platforms. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and a reminder that Live from My Drum Room t-shirts are available for $25 in the contiguous US, and I'm going to give you the Venmo information so that you can purchase one. And I want to take a moment and thank everyone who's bought one already. A reminder that 100% of the proceeds go toward a scholarship at the Percussive Arts Society, PAS, and you're supporting a great cause when you buy one of these shirts. So the Venmo information, if you're listening and not watching this on YouTube, it's at John-DChristopher-2. You can also email me at livefrommydrumroom@gmail.com with any questions. All right, so thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. Remember, no drummers are harmed on any show. And drummers, when in doubt, leave it out. I'll see you again real soon.